YouTube Ozic going. The Goat House is back with 15 big name players that could actually get cut this NFL offseason before free agency. It's a mixture of big names that I really do think will get cut, and then some other names that might shock a lot of people, but would not surprise me, actually. Be prepared. There's always those crazy ones. So excited to go over this. We have 15 more players for our Twitter subscribers. All kinds of free agency, draft, playoff coverage here at the Goat House. Like, subscribe to notifications on. Check out our sponsors, Liquid IV, GLD Shop, code GOAT. Any link you're looking for, pin in the comments. Budda Baker. This would shock a lot of people. Big name safety, star safety of the Arizona Cardinals. Remember, before the season, there was a little bit of issue, with the new staff. Remember, there's a whole new front office, new coaching staff. I don't know if the issue was specifically with them, but all of a sudden it came up that he wanted to readjust his contract. And the way they set it up was so they could easily be able to move on from him this offseason. That's the way they structured it. Now, it doesn't mean they're guaranteed to move on from him. Not guaranteeing anything with any of these, or especially Budda Baker here. But if they do cut him, that's what that number is down there. $15.1 million is cleared if they move on from Budda Baker. So the decision is, would they rather have, it's a valuable safety, would they rather have Budda Baker, or would they rather have $15.1 million? Is there going to be an issue on his side as well with the contract, things like that? Cardinals are still kind of rebuilding. They're a little, they started that process last offseason, so they're kind of in stage 2 here going into this offseason. But would they rather get younger players? Jonathan Gannon coaches a hell of a secondary. He knows how to coach it. So does he think he can build it? A solid one, not spending a whole lot of money. He definitely could think that. So that's one to watch here. Budda Baker, they could free over $15 million. Would they rather have that amount of money? It's possible. It's possible here. Next, another safety, Chicago Bears safety Eddie Jackson. When he earned this big contract, he was a star safety that season right before earning that contract. And then he kind of went downhill, but then he's been playing a little bit better. Look at last year, this year. I thought he played a little bit better last year. The Bears defense stepped up this year. Somewhat solid safety, but would they rather have that $12.56 million? Do they view Eddie Jackson as a long-term solution? Because remember, they started their rebuild maybe a year or 2 years ago, perhaps. So it's coming along pretty well. The way Eberflus coaches that, he coaches a solid defense. So they could say, like, we can get a way cheaper option at free safety, and he might even be better, at the same time, the way we coach him up, the way we develop these young players, and they've done a good job at some of these, especially in the secondary. Look at the corners, look at the other safety, Jaquan Brisker. So that would actually make some sense. Solid player for the Bears, but $12.56 million. I think they would rather have, they have a lot of money, so they could afford that. It's not like they're going to be desperate for that, clearing Eddie Jackson's cap there. They're not going to be desperate, but I can definitely see it kind of going a cheaper route at free safety, and develop, a younger route as well, and developing that player. So we're sticking with the Bears here. Another one for the Bears, and this might be more likely than Eddie Jackson, perhaps. Cody Whitehair, who's a guard/center. He's played both pretty well throughout his career. I thought he was better in the earlier seasons. If the Bears move on from him, they clear $9.14 million. So that's a bit as well. It's not as much as the last two guys we talked about. That's a lot. I know the Bears, again, aren't desperate. They have a lot of money. They could have this much more if they move on from a player or two, or maybe more. He didn't play the full amount, not even near the full amount of snaps this year. Another spot where the Bears like having those young players, and they're continuing on. Now it's kind of like a retool. Like, they're past that they're higher above like just stage 1 of the rebuild process, but they still want those young players. They still want to gather those young players. So could they potentially find a younger and better possibly option here than Cody Whitehair on the interior offensive line? I think this is pretty likely here. Clearing a good amount of space, moving on from Whitehair. So we'll see. But there's two options for the Chicago Bears. The Bengals, not a lot of money saved here with Nick Scott. But this is an interesting one. And they wouldn't have, it's not like they have more debt, a ton more dead money than what they would clear. So, but they would clear the Bengals, that is. Nick Scott, why this is interesting, they just signed him this offseason. They lost Jesse Bates. They didn't want to spend that big amount of money, and they feel like that we develop and we coach very well on defense. Let's go get a solid option. They went and got Nick Scott, and he wasn't really playing that well, and then he kind of lost his job there. They were rolling with Jordan Battle, the rookie, who looked pretty solid out there with Daxton Hill. So after 1 year, they may say this may not be the guy for us. Let's clear a little bit. To me, 2.3 doesn't seem like a lot with some of the other names we're going to talk about, but to me, it's $2.3 million that could help you sign another, guy like this that could actually work out at a different position possibly. So, and for a team that is kind of like a contending team, they have a lot of money to spend. Like the Cincinnati Bengals, 2.3 is a lot. So that's actually a bigger name one to me because they just signed him this last offseason. So interesting one that I would definitely watch out for. Could he make his way back to the Rams? He worked out there, or if Raheem Morris lands a job, as a coach, could he find his way in that scheme because he fit that so well. We saw John Johnson signed a big contract with the Browns. He eventually got released. He's back with the Rams. So I kind of see a pattern there, I suppose. So want to look out for. Here's a big one. This is probably the biggest one yet. Or Budda Baker is up there as well. DeForest Buckner, star defensive tackle for quite a while of the Indianapolis Colts, and obviously was the 49ers as well. But a whopping $20.25 million if they cut Buckner. Tough decision here because this is a very good player. Very good player. Over $20 million, that is a lot. That is a lot of money, a lot of cap room right there for the Colts. So a tough decision with one more year left on his deal. This is one where they ask Buckner, can we adjust this? Do we give you an extension and kind of push some money back? Will you take a team-friendly deal here? And I don't know if he would do that because he's such a good player. Maybe he wants more of a contender because the Colts were in some sort of that retool process with their roster. Obviously not a rebuild. They're past that stage. They never really went into that stage. They kind of just stayed decent. But they need to figure out a way to get over that hump, obviously. So tough decision with Buckner. There was some people, it was more just silly rumors last year at this time saying the Colts are going to cut Buckner, and I was against that. I was like, nope, it's not going to happen. I think it was more so fans like, oh, the Colts are going to cut Buckner, we're going to get him. It was kind of more of that BS talk. So I was not on board last year. This year, we could. It's possible. We'll take a look at this one because it's a lot of money. Tough decision for the Colts, and we got to sit down and say, and the Colts got to as well. Is he worth $20 million? And he's such a good player that with the market going up, that probably. But would we rather have that money? Like, what would we pay him on a new contract? That's what they're gonna kind of sit down and figure out. I definitely think they're not gonna go. Step one is cut Buckner. I think there's more attempts at something different first, like we talked about, an adjusted contract, an extension that maybe makes it cheaper per year, perhaps if they adjust it during that extension. It's gonna depend on what Buckner decides here. The Colts will try to do something. So that's a big name player that could be available. Some exciting players in this list. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, this is one that I definitely expect to happen. I think you out there expect to happen. He's been underwhelming for the Chiefs. Obviously, he has that big playability, that speed, that separation, but disappointing with the drops. And it felt like he was better with the Packers than he was with the Chiefs. So a little disappointing. You could save $11.98 million. I think the Chiefs would rather have a contending team. I think they would view that money more useful than MVS. I think they would. So definitely see this one coming. It's a good, just about $12 million in cap space for, again, a contending team. That's a lot. That's a shit ton. So, and then could he make his way on the Jets with Aaron Rodgers? Getting ahead of ourselves here, but that's a pretty good prediction. First, they got to cut MVS, but I would predict that they cut him, and then he very well could end up on the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. Definitely could see that. Next one. Big one here. Big one. And right away, everyone's probably like, no. Keenan Allen has still got it. It's a star receiver. So good with Justin Herbert. There is no way the Chargers can cut Keenan Allen, right? You look at the contract, the way it's structured, how they can get out of it this year. And, you don't want to get out of a contract with Keenan Allen. But the amount he's going to be paid and the amount that you can save, $23.1 million. That is a lot. A lot of money. And you take a look at the Chargers situation. They fired their front office. They fired their coaching staff. They are in a hole. The bad front office. I've been saying, like, how bad Brandon Staley's been. The front office probably has been worse because the disaster they are in financially and the contracts they've given out and decisions they made, pretty brutal. So they're towards the bottom of the NFL right now for this offseason. And who's it going to be? Is it going to be Harbaugh? And that's a guy that just wants to win at all times. So I don't think they want to go for this lengthy rebuild process. I don't think they want to do that. So that would be an argument to keep Keenan Allen because they want to win right now. But they also need spending money to make this roster better. So $23 million or Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's still great, but he has the durability issues. He's getting another year older. You could argue, I think more people, knowledgeable people would argue that the $23 million could be more useful actually. So maybe there's talk about an adjustment of the contract, whatever. But that is a tough decision. And there was some talk during the offseason about his contract. There was a restructure. It kind of felt like it was gearing up to be his last year. But then he went off again. But then he did miss some games down the stretch. So tough decision there. The Chargers need to find several ways to clear space. How desperate will they get? Do they want to get rid of good players? I think the fact that they're aging players could gear them in the situation, like steer them in the decision of maybe doing it. And here's another one that had an incredible season. Khalil Mack had a monster season, better than last year. But you can clear a large number here, $23.25 million you can clear. Two players, just those two players, you're freeing, what is that, close to $45 million. Or more than that, actually. My math was off there. Over $46 million. So that's something. That can, how much that can help you? I know you get worse by doing that, but you got to find ways to get better players. You want younger players. You don't want to start at square one with the rebuild or whatever, so it's tough. It's tough. Khalil Mack had a monster season, but they have Joey Bosa. They have Tui Pelotu in there now too. Had a pretty solid rookie season, so they got guys in there. They're no Khalil Mack, or Bosa should be better than him if he's healthy, obviously. But tough decisions for the Chargers. Do we get rid of good players? But hey, we do need this cap space. And they have more players as well to look out for. Corey Linsley, Eric Kendricks, players like that. So tough decisions. First, they got to hire some guys on the staff. So a team to watch this offseason. Probably maybe an interesting team to watch this offseason. Dolphins, Emmanuel Ogbah, who's been a pretty solid player for them, but obviously switching defenses a little bit, bringing in Vic Fangio, or really since Brian Flores left. I thought Ogbah worked better in Flores' defense, and since then maybe he hasn't been as solid. But still a solid player. It's just, it's tough because they have some injuries at the pass rush position. Ogbah, a little bit different style player, obviously, than Chubb and Phillips, but they're going to sit down and say, will we rather have Ogbah or would we rather have an extra $13.7 million to use in the offseason with a team that views himself as a contender? So that's definitely one to watch. I can definitely see them moving on from Ogbah and getting that 13.7 extra in cap for this offseason. Next, the Vikings, longtime Viking, great safety, Harrison Smith. It could be time for him because he is declining. He's still a good player, still a very instinctive, solid player. Good in coverage, can line up line of scrimmage, could blitz, play in the box. So he could still do those things. He's just obviously not as good as he was a few years ago or more than that. And the Vikings the last few years have been in a tough cap space situation. They're starting to get they're getting in those years where they have a bit free. They do have to extend some guys, some big-time players, but that is even more future cap space. So, but you still want to be a little careful with future cap space. But they have a little bit of spending money, but they could use a bit more, and you can move on from Harrison Smith and free $11.38 million. So it'll be a tough decision for them. But they use multiple safeties in Brian Flores' defense. Cam Bynum, Josh Patelis, and they use Harrison Smith. So move on from Harrison Smith. You probably need another safety, but they drafted one last year, and you have the two that played somewhat solid this year. So this is one I'm kind of preparing myself. I'm a diehard Vikings fan. Harrison Smith's arguably my favorite player of all time, actually. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But last year there was some talk on it, and I was like, no, No way. Don't do it. There's no way they're going to do it. They didn't do it. This year, I'm preparing myself. I actually think it's more of a legit discussion this year. So going to be interesting to see where he ends up. But that's definitely a big, big name, a smart football player to watch for, maybe being available. And, you would like for him. I mean, his earlier years played a lot of cover too, but you would move him around a bit, obviously. So, one of those types of teams. So we'll see. Next, this one, big name, J.C. Jackson was an all-pro caliber player just a few years ago. Went downhill with the Chargers, and it made his way back to the Patriots. With that trade, it was very odd. This is an obvious one. He's kind of a big name guy still, though, because you got to think there's still that playmaking ability in there somewhere, because that was just a couple years ago that he was an all-pro caliber player. But when they traded for him, it was pretty obvious that it was like a one-year rental, and the Chargers just want to get rid of him. So, pretty obvious. So, $14.37 million. You got to move on from that unless you completely, takes a major pay. I don't see it. Bill Belichick gone as well, which Mayo's probably running is very, very, very similar, if not the same defense as Belichick. But does Belichick end up in Atlanta? Seems like that was our prediction early last week or whenever that was, and it seems like that's the likely landing spot. Could he make his way there? So interesting to see there. But this is one, it almost has to be done. $14.37 million is a ton of money for cornerbacks. That's the top of the line, like the top tier is around 18, 19 million. It's kind of pushing a little bit, 16, 17. So this is like a slightly under that 14.37 million. And that's what they would clear. It's not what he's getting paid, but it's a lot of money. And another defensive back that we can almost guarantee this one. It's a big name player that this has got to be coming. Eagles got to be moving on from Kevin Byard, who seemed like a rental at the time. And the way he played, the way the whole defense played, but the way he played looked like he declined since he was on the Titans. And he was an elite all-pro caliber safety just 2 seasons ago. But Eagles are a contending team with a lot. They spend a lot, obviously. So being able to clear a lot of money, $13.53 million, and a guy that didn't really play that well for you, it's a must. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen unless he takes a major pay cut. But I don't even think they would think about that. I think it's as soon as the offseason hits, boom. Yeah, I actually think it's gonna be like that there with Kevin Byard and the Eagles. So you like to think, because he's 30 years old. To me, that's not old. He was really good 2 seasons ago. He probably needs the right scheme, right defense. Titans, when he was really solid, ran a lot of 2-man under and cover 4. So, yeah, I guess split safety scheme. But we've seen him at single high a bit too. But maybe that's a little bit too much, which we saw the Eagles doing with them just for a 30-year-old. It's not that old. But single high, I guess, is for the young guns with the speed. The reactions. So you like to think he still could be somewhat decent. Next, speaking of the Titans, DeAndre Hopkins. This is a tricky one. And again, this whole video, I'm not saying all of these will happen. I'm not saying, I think Kevin Byard will happen. I think J.C. Jackson. I don't want to guarantee really anything, but I can almost guarantee some of those. But this is definitely one where it's up in the air. It's tricky. Where are the Titans at? A lot of people said they were in rebuild, like what they were doing last offseason. And I was saying, no, I don't actually think they are. And they signed DeAndre Hopkins, and that proved that they really weren't. But they almost had like 1 foot in the rebuild pool. Just they were dipping the toes in there a little bit, but they weren't really in rebuild. And based on how the season went, it kind of shows they probably should have went in rebuild, right? Which we kind of thought, but I didn't think they were actually in, and they weren't. They Vrabel's mindset, they were trying to stay competitive. They want to win football games. Now I think you get more than just the foot, just the toes, or just even the foot. You might jump in that rebuild pool. Maybe. It's just really up in the air where they're at, but I think they got to do that. But they have a lot of cap space, so are they desperate for the $10.11 million? No. But if they are going kind of full rebuild and trying to build around Will Levis, get young guys to grow with him, because they're bringing in new staff, they want to get new guys for the staff. If they're going in a rebuild, then they probably move on from DeAndre Hopkins, because he's still really good. He had a really good year, but it's still an aging player. That's not going to be around forever. It's a 1 more year left in his deal. Like, might as well. we might as well move on from him, get that money, get the young guys. That's probably the thinking. But the other side of it was he's a really good player, and he was Will Levis's best target. Like Hopkins was instantly better when Levis came in compared to Tannehill. And it helped Levis out a lot as well, having that big-time star, like smart receiver, veteran receiver. So do you kind of like stunt his growth a little bit? So it's a tricky decision. But if they go full rebuild, which they have not done yet, people thought they were last year, but if they do it this year, then I think they do it. So it's definitely one to watch. We got to see what happens first. Two more left, two Broncos players. You almost forget about Tim Patrick. You almost go, oh, yeah. He was a pretty sneaky good receiver. He got an interesting contract. I was a little surprised at the time about that contract, but he just keeps getting injured. Unfortunately, just keeps getting injured since that contract, and we just have not seen him. And you forget about this player because it's supposed to be, there's always questions with the Broncos receivers, but it's supposed to be Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Tim Patrick. And Patrick was arguably better than one or both those guys. I'd argue not both, but when he played. But hasn't played, keeps getting injured, $9.5 million of it. And they're in a little bit of a hole too, based on, their past spending. They definitely need the money. There's other guys they can cut as well. We're going to talk about one more, but there's other guys too. And again, Twitter subscribers will get 15 more guys that we'll talk about. But I thought, he wasn't the speediest guy when he played. He was smart, pretty good, pretty good route runner. But with all these injuries, like, is it slow him down even more? I think it's an obvious one. I think you move on from it. It's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate for both sides, the injuries, especially for Tim Patrick. Got to feel bad for this guy. But you move on from him. You clear. It's a lot of money, especially for the Broncos and the situation they're in. But they have a lot of ways to clear space. We'll talk about more and more about that with teams who can clear a lot of space. We talk about those things on Twitter a lot during the offseason. We get closer to free agency, but $9.5 million, I think they do that. And then one more, a big one that everyone likes to talk about, Russell Wilson. Interesting one, because if they make him just a normal cut, they actually lose money. They actually go backwards, a lot of it too. But if they designate him a post June 1st cut, then it's $0. So they don't save. So there's a bunch of dead money. But they don't lose. They don't go backwards on money. So it'd be $0. So this is what will happen. It's kind of already been said. I mean, Sean Payton came out recently and said, we haven't made a for sure decision. I think it's BS. They know what they're doing. They want Russell Wilson to, waive this, waive that, or to, take a cut so they can move on from him, eat some of that. But he's not going to do that. I think we're already past that point anyways. But you don't have to wait until for anybody that doesn't know what the post June 1st cut is, you don't actually have to wait until after June 1st to cut him. Teams can have a couple in offseason. They can designate a post June 1st cut, but do it beforehand. The only downside of that is you don't actually get the savings, all the savings, till after June 1st, even though he's already cut. But in this case, it's $0 anyway. So it's a win to be able to do. So they're going to do this. Offseason is going to happen. Maybe it's not instantly, but the Broncos will cut Russell Wilson with a post June 1st designation. And they won't go backwards in cap space, but they won't have any extra cap space to add on top of how much they already have, if that makes sense. So, and I've already heard some rumors where he could go. I think it's going to depend on what teams. I've heard the Vikings a bit. Quite a bit, actually. I've heard the Falcons, but the Vikings, it depends on what they do with Kirk Cousins first in free agency. And then could Russell Wilson sit around a bit? Could a team see what they do in the draft and then get him? Yeah, I think you can get him either or. If you get if you get a rookie quarterback or if you miss on a quarterback, because then could they sit behind Wilson for a year? I mean, it's got to be a good guy to learn behind. It's just he just doesn't have all the talent in the world right now. Like he did before, but I guess he was a little better this year than he was last year. A lot of dink and dunk though. Can't get the ball downfield like he used to, but it's still a big name, and he could definitely help a team or mentor, a young guy for sure. So that's definitely a big one that I know everyone expected on this video, but a little tricky with the money, but not really. You're just not going to gain any new cap space with him, and you're going to make him a post June 1st cut. But he's going to be available right when they cut him still. So I'm really excited. I love the offseason. I love free agency. I love going over the different scenarios, the cuts, the trades, the cap space, how it impacts teams financially, restructures. We always cover all of that right away on our Twitter. If you're not following our Twitter for that type of stuff, you're really missing out. But we got you guys covered here and on Twitter for every single thing NFL. So join us. Like, subscribe to notifications on. Follow us on Twitter. I just said that. You can follow on Twitter. Check out our sponsors, Liquid IV, GLD Shop, code GO. Links pinned in the comments for anything you're looking for. It's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.